Millionaire visits her son's grave and finds a black cleaning lady crying with 3 children. What happens leaves her in shock. Before the story begins, tell me something. Where are you watching from? Write it down here in the comments. I love to know how far these stories can reach. And if you love intense love stories, full of emotional twists and heartwarming endings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That really helps me keep creating content like this and makes all the difference for the channel to grow. Let's go on this journey together. It was a grey November afternoon in Charleston. The heavy sky seemed to cry along with the city, letting the steady drizzle fall and turning the cemetery into a melancholic mirror of cold stones and lost memories. Claire Davenport stepped out of the black chauffeur-driven car, holding a dark leather umbrella and a small bouquet of white lilies, her son's favorite flowers. She walked firmly along the stone path, her heels echoing between tombs and soaked trees. She was impeccable, as always. She wore a light beige French-cut overcoat, pearly grey gloves covering her elegant hands, and her blonde grey hair, cut at shoulder length, was neatly tucked behind her ear. Her face carried the marks of rigidity and pain she never knew how to express. She didn't cry in public. She didn't even cry at home. Adrian's grave was on top of the hill, overlooking the southern hills of the city. It was an imposing white marble headstone with her son's name engraved in gold letters, Adrian Charles Davenport, 1989-2021. He had died exactly 2 years ago in a car accident that Claire could never speak about without her jaw locking from pain and guilt. But that day, as she approached the grave, Claire suddenly stopped. Her body tensed. Just a few steps from the headstone, kneeling on the wet ground, was a woman, black, wearing a dark blue uniform with the hospital logo embroidered on the chest. Her curly hair was tied in a simple bun, and her face, even darker with the rain, trembled silently. Around her, 3 small children were quietly crying. Were they 2 boys and a girl? No, 2 girls and a boy. They looked about 5 years old, and even though they were soaked, their clothes were clean. The girls had braids with undone bows. The boy, his head shaved, squinted his eyes as if trying to hold back his tears. Claire couldn't breathe properly. The children were touching the grave. One of them had left a folded drawing on the stone. Another held a wilted flower. That was unacceptable. She stepped forward without hesitation. "Excuse me, but this is a private space. What are you doing here?" she said coldly and precisely, without raising her voice. The woman slowly turned. She had very large brown eyes, swollen with tears. Her dark skin glistened with the rain. She didn't get up. She just looked at Claire, with pain, but without fear. "I'm sorry. He meant a lot to us too." Claire felt the ground give way beneath her feet. The words hit her soul like a blade soaked in salt. "What do you mean? Meant a lot," she murmured, her voice faltering for the first time. The woman just lowered her gaze and wrapped her arms around the 3 children, as if shielding them from the world or from a storm about to break. Claire stood still, her eyes locked on the boy. He had a marked chin, long eyelashes, and the eyes, light grey, exactly like Adrian's. The pain throbbed deep in her stomach. The umbrella slipped from her hand. The rain poured directly onto her pale face. She didn't notice. The only thing that echoed inside her was a silent question. Who are these children? And who is this woman? Claire entered the silent mansion without even taking off her coat. The automatic lights turned on around her, but she didn't notice. Her wet feet left dark footprints on the white marble floor at the entrance. Everything was just as always, perfect, cold, immaculate. But inside her, nothing was the same anymore. She climbed the stairs slowly, as if each step weighed a ton. Every image from the cemetery spun in her mind like a needle. The woman's blue uniform, her resigned look, the drawing left on the headstone, and the boy's eyes, those grey pupils, as vivid as the ones she saw in her oldest memories of Adrian at 5 years old, exactly that age. She entered her son's room, which remained untouched. The shelves were still full of childhood books, swimming trophies, framed photographs. She touched one of them with her gloved fingertips. It was a photo of Adrian in the garden at 5 years old, smiling with his mouth closed, eyes squinting in the sunlight. It was the same look as the boy's. She sat on the bed and rested her elbows on her knees. Her hardened face now seemed cracked. "This can't be. It's a coincidence. Just a coincidence," she whispered to herself, but the doubt was already rooted like poison. She called Beatrice, her trusted secretary, on the internal intercom. The woman appeared shortly after, as discreet as always, dressed in black with her hair in a low bun. "I need you to find out who that woman was today at the cemetery," Claire said without raising her head. "Yes, Mrs. Davenport. Do you have any information about her?" "St. James Hospital uniform. 3 children. She must be registered as a cleaning staff. Don't make a fuss, and keep this between us." Beatrice nodded and left silently. The next day, Claire woke up early. She had slept poorly, haunted by images mixed with the sound of the rain from the night before. She felt as if she were waking from a dream, or entering one. Beatrice left a folder on the office desk. Claire opened it with trembling hands. Name: Danielle Renee Harris. Age: 30 years old. Occupation: hospital cleaning assistant, fixed shifts and extra night shifts. Workplace: St. James Memorial Hospital. Active since 2019. Family status: single mother of 3 children, 5-year-old triplets. Claire read the last line more than once. Triplets. She closed her eyes, and the image of the 3 children appeared vividly. Each one with a distinct personality, but there was a connection between them that went beyond siblings. It was visceral. Claire shivered down her spine. On the next page, something caught her attention even more. A hospital note, dated 2020. Volunteer, Adrian Davenport. Support in the pediatric ward and assistance in emergencies. Positive relationship with cleaning staff and night support. Claire let the papers fall on the desk. She felt her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. Adrian had never told her any of this. He had never mentioned volunteer work at the hospital. And now, that woman, the triplets, the look in that boy's eyes. She whispered with a choked voice, "My son had an entire life I never saw." She stood up, walking to the library window. The sky was clear that day, but inside her, a storm had just begun. And deep in her mind, one question kept whispering non-stop. Who was Danielle Harris, and why did Adrian keep her a secret? The next morning, Claire parked her imported black car in the farthest corner of the St. James Hospital parking lot. She had declined the chauffeur that day. She wanted to be in control, to see with her own eyes. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a need. The day was muggy, the kind of heat that made the car windows sweat from the inside. Claire kept the air conditioning on, but her body remained tense, almost rigid. Her hands gripped tightly the folder containing the name, shift, and background of that woman, Danielle Harris. She waited for almost an hour. She watched patients coming out, nurses smoking hurriedly, ambulances arriving in haste and noise, until she saw her. Danielle was coming out the side door, her shoulders slightly hunched, carrying a worn canvas bag and a folded jacket in her arms. She was wearing faded sneakers, her hair tied in a low bun, and the uniform already stained from the night shift work. She walked quickly and steadily, but her eyes looked distant, exhausted. Claire stepped out of the car with her heart pounding. She crossed the hot asphalt as if walking on embers. She called out, "Danielle Harris?" Danielle stopped, surprised. She looked back and froze when she recognized the woman from the cemetery. "I'm Claire Davenport, Adrian's mother." The name hung in the air like dry thunder. Danielle didn't respond. She only lowered her head slightly as if bracing for a blow. "I want to talk to you, now." Danielle hesitated. She looked around, wary, but then she nodded, pointing to an empty bench near the hedge that separated the back parking lot. They sat in silence. Claire didn't know where to start. Her penetrating gaze observed every small gesture of the other woman, the way she kept her hands crossed on her lap, how she avoided eye contact. "You knew my son," she said at last. "Don't lie. I want the truth." Danielle took a deep breath. Her eyes welled up, but her voice came out steady. "I did know him. Adrian volunteered here, on the night shift. He helped in the pediatric ward, and sometimes in the ER." "Why did he never tell me about that?" Claire asked, her tone sharp, almost losing control. "Maybe because he wanted to do something that was just his, something not tied to the Davenport name." Claire blinked, hit by the words. Danielle continued, her voice softer. "He always came after 9. Said he liked the hospital's quiet at night. That's when people needed someone to listen the most. And he listened. He really listened." Claire squinted, trying to picture her son in that environment, in a simple lab coat, wiping tears from unknown children, far from charity galas and social events with high society. "He met my kids here," Danielle said suddenly. "Jordan had a fever one night. We didn't have health insurance. Adrian showed up with a cup of water and a blanket. He stayed for hours, telling stories to the 3 of them." Claire held her breath. She felt that every word was peeling away a layer of the son she thought she knew. "You and him, did you have some kind of relationship?" The question slipped out in a near whisper. Danielle took a while to answer. Her eyes for the first time met Claire's. "He was good to me. He was kind, but I'd rather not talk about that now." Claire sensed the wall. There was more, much more, and that woman wasn't going to reveal everything at once, not out of fear, but out of respect. Or maybe, out of love. "You're hiding something from me," Claire said, eyes narrowing. Danielle lowered her gaze. "I'm protecting what I have left." Claire stood up slowly. Her chest felt tight, like she was in an emotional freefall. She didn't say thank you. She didn't threaten. She just walked back to the car with slow steps, and a mind in turmoil. On the bench, Danielle stayed still, staring at the ground. She knew the past could no longer be buried. And Claire was starting to understand that her son's life was much bigger than everything she had built around her own name. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat alone in her office, surrounded by dark wooden walls and the scent of old books that had never been read. In front of her, the same photo of Adrian at 5 years old. The sweet look, the light eyes, the innocent expression that now seemed to echo in the eyes of a child she barely knew, but who deeply unsettled her. She wondered how many versions of Adrian had existed beyond her watchful eyes. The Adrian of parties, of expensive schools, of medal pictures and rehearsed speeches, and this other one, the man who worked overnight, with children, with the poor, with a woman like Danielle. The next day, Claire returned to the hospital. This time she didn't demand anything, she just asked for 5 minutes. Danielle hesitated but agreed. They brought coffee in paper cups and sat in a secluded corner next to the empty parking lot of the pediatric wing. The wind blew gently. Danielle looked tired, but there was a steadiness in her eyes that Claire still didn't understand. Did he bring toys?" Claire asked directly. but her voice trembled. Danielle nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Yes. Always hidden in his backpack. He said the hospital had too much bureaucracy, and the kids needed joy, not permission. And did he help your kids too? Claire asked, crossing her arms as if trying to shield herself from something she could no longer control. More than many in my own family, Danielle answered calmly. He showed up even when he wasn't on shift. He helped Jordan with his letters, sat with Maya and Chloe to paint, and when I was exhausted, he stayed with them, just so I could sleep peacefully for an hour. He never asked for anything in return. He just said, "You need to breathe, Danielle." Claire closed her eyes for a second. A sharp pain sliced through her chest like a blade. She had always prided herself on giving Adrian everything, the best schools, trips, connections, opportunities. But what about time? About listening? About the right to simply be a young man with empathy? He never told me any of this, she whispered. Nothing. Danielle lowered her eyes. Maybe because he knew you wouldn't understand. The sentence landed like a blow. Claire wanted to argue back, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew it was true. Adrian had always been quiet, polite, yes, but reserved. And when he started pulling away in recent years, Claire blamed work, routine, stress, never herself. I was his mother, she said bitterly. How could he have lived all that and left me out? Danielle looked at her with an unexpected yet firm tenderness. Because sometimes, even the most beloved son needs a space where he can just be himself, without expectations, without titles, without fear of disappointing anyone. Claire clenched her hands in her lap. She was on the verge of tears, but she wouldn't give in. Not in front of Danielle. That woman, poor, alone, worn by life, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Shame. She felt small. Was he happy with you all? She asked, unable to look Danielle in the eye. He seemed whole, Danielle replied after a long pause. For the first time, someone looked at us without pity. And for the first time, he was just Adrian. Not the name, not the last name. Claire stood up slowly. The pain in her chest was now something deeper than sadness. It was regret. She walked back to the car in silence. Before getting in, she looked back. Danielle was still sitting there, motionless, as if she knew the past had finally been heard. But Claire wasn't ready for what would come next. There was still something hidden, something Danielle hadn't said, and that would change everything. In the days that followed, Claire Davenport sank into a heavy silence. She cancelled appointments, avoided calls, ignored emails from her team at the institute. She spent hours sitting in the library, flipping through old photo albums, as if searching for some clue in her son's gaze that could justify everything that was coming to light. But no matter how much she dug into the past, the questions remained unanswered. It was on a cloudy afternoon, while the rain lightly tapped against the office windows, that Beatrice walked in with an unusual expression. She was holding a brown envelope, already yellowed from weeks forgotten in a hospital drawer. They found this in the St. James administration files. They said Adrian delivered it a few days before the accident, she said quietly, placing the envelope on the heavy wooden desk. Claire stared at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. Her hands hesitated before picking up the envelope. It was sealed, with Adrian's handwriting in the upper right corner. She would recognize that handwriting anywhere. Slowly, she broke the seal. The letter was 2 pages long. The paper had been carefully folded. Claire took a deep breath before she began to read. Mom, if you're reading this, it's because something went wrong. I'm sorry. I wish I'd had the courage to tell you everything sooner, but I never knew how. I know you always expected great things from me. You always did. But maybe the great things I found aren't the ones the world expects from a Davenport. I met a woman, Danielle, and I met 3 children who taught me more about love and courage than any classroom or gala dinner ever could. I don't know where this story will lead, and maybe I won't even have time to show you. But if one day I'm not here anymore, I just ask one thing: meet them, look at them with an open heart. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why I chose this path. With love, Adrian. The words blurred before Claire's eyes. Her throat tightened into an impossible knot. Her heart beat slowly, but it hurt like never before. She pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes. A tear fell. Then another. And then, like a dam breaking, Claire began to cry. Not a silent, restrained cry like the ones she faked at public ceremonies. It was a raw, choking cry from someone who had been struck by a truth that could no longer be undone. Adrian had written that to her, not as a plea, but as one last gesture of trust. And she had never imagined there could be a part of her son's life beyond the gilded ballrooms, away from the important last names, in a modest home with children without legacy or surname, but with real affection. She hugged the letter to her chest as if trying to hug her own son. But it was too late. He was no longer there. And as her sobs echoed through the mansion's silence, Claire finally understood that her son had found a family. One she never saw, nor wanted to see. But now, maybe there was still time to meet them. The next afternoon, Claire drove alone to the neighborhood where Danielle lived. For the first time in many years, she wasn't wearing heels or jewelry. Her hair was tied in a simple bun, a light knit sweater, and a light coat. The neighborhood was humble but clean. Children played on the sidewalk, some on rusty bikes, others drawing with crayons on the cracked pavement. When she parked the car, Claire looked around cautiously. She took a deep breath before crossing the street. She felt that each step was taking her not just to another address, but to another version of her own story, one she had ignored until it was too late. Danielle opened the door with a look of surprise. Her hair was down, she wore a simple shirt and sweatpants. Her brown eyes carried that same quiet strength as always, but she looked more tired. "Claire," she said, not hiding her astonishment. "I didn't think you'd come back. I need to understand," she replied with a firm but visibly shaken voice. "Why did my son care so much about you and those children?" Danielle hesitated. She looked inside the house, as if searching for courage in the short hallways and scattered toys in the living room. "You can come in if you want." Claire stepped in slowly. The place was modest, but there was life in every corner. Drawings stuck to the wall, little backpacks leaning against the couch, a faint aroma of food in the air. "Want some tea?" Danielle asked. "No," Claire replied. "I want answers." They sat in opposite chairs at the kitchen table. Silence stretched until Danielle finally broke it. "Adrienne wasn't just a hospital volunteer. We met before that." Claire frowned. "Before?" "I worked on the support staff for an institute event 6 years ago. A charity dinner at the Harbour View Hotel. I was assigned to help prep the VIP room. He showed up there with that awkward laugh, asking where the meatless canapes were." Claire swallowed hard. She remembered that event. She'd been photographed with senators that night. "We talked. At first, he didn't know I was staff. Or maybe he pretended not to know. Doesn't matter. But he was different from the start. Simple, kind. We started meeting outside of work hours, in secret. He was afraid of your world's reaction, and I knew there was no space for me in his universe." Claire couldn't speak. She stayed still, just listening with wide eyes. It was quick, intense. And when I found out I was pregnant, Adrian promised he'd find a way. He said he wanted to tell you everything, that he'd take responsibility for the children. But a week later, he died." Danielle squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back tears. "I never had the chance to say this out loud. I've kept this story to myself for 5 years." Claire stood up, unsure how to react. She was in shock. Her head was spinning. Adrian was a father of 3 children, and she never knew. "You're telling me Jordan, Maya, and Chloe are my grandchildren?" she asked, her voice choked. Danielle nodded silently. "Then why didn't you come to me? Why stay silent all this time?" "Because I knew you'd see me as someone after money, as a threat to his image. I just wanted to raise them in peace." Claire staggered to the door, her legs weak. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob. "They have his eyes," she whispered. "I know." Claire left without saying anything else. She got into the car with trembling hands. Sitting there alone, she finally understood that everything she thought she knew about her own son was just the surface, and what lay beneath that surface was now impossible to ignore. Claire spent the following days like a shadow in her own house. She barely ate, didn't answer calls. She wandered from room to room with spiraling thoughts, as if Adrian's presence was in every wall, every marble detail, every old photograph. She reread the letter every night, but the pain of having been shut out from that part of her son's life mixed with an even more corrosive feeling: loss of control. Claire Davenport, the respected heiress of Charleston, was now facing something no influence, bank account, or last name could change. Then, on the 4th day after visiting Danielle's house, Claire broke the silence. "She lied to me. She must be lying. It was all calculated. She waited for the right moment to appear." Beatrice, quietly, watched her employer talking to herself in the office, her voice trembling and her eyes filled with restrained fury. "Those children, they're part of my blood. I have the right to protect them," Claire said, abruptly standing up. The next day, Danielle received formal correspondence. A white envelope, sealed with the crest of the Davenport and Myers law office. When she opened it, her hands were trembling. Claire was petitioning for legal custody of the triplets. The justification: to offer better living conditions, private education, emotional stability. In other words, to take them from their mother. Danielle sat on the couch with the paper in her lap, her eyes staring into space. Jordan came closer, holding a toy car. "Mommy, are you sad?" She hid the paper under a pillow. She forced a smile. "No, my love. Just tired." But inside, a volcano was forming. That night, after putting the children to bed, Danielle went to the hospital for her night shift. There, in the nearly empty cafeteria, she found someone who had been quietly observing her struggle for months: attorney Rebecca Lynn. Young, of Asian descent, straight short hair, a firm gaze, and a direct voice. "I heard about the summons," Rebecca said, pulling up a chair. "You need help. Legal. Urgent." "She wants to take my children," Danielle murmured, unable to hide the pain. "As if love could be bought with expensive schools." Rebecca nodded. "You're stronger than you think, but you'll have to expose everything. Are you willing?" Danielle looked out the hospital window, where the night blanketed the streets in heavy silence. "They're all I have." Rebecca placed a hand over hers. "Then let's fight." 2 days later, the story leaked. It started as a whisper on a local blog, but soon it hit city radio stations and news websites. Millionaire widow tries to take custody of grandchildren she never met, pushing away the biological mother. Opinions were divided. Part of the elite defended Claire, saying the children would have a better life under her care. But on social media, outrage was growing. An old photo of Danielle with Adrienne at the hospital, smiling with the newborn triplets in their arms, went viral. And the question dominating the comments was just one. Why does she want the grandchildren now, and not when they were born? Claire locked herself in the mansion. The media waited outside the gates. The reputation that had taken decades to build was now slipping through her fingers. But she still refused to give in. Danielle, alongside Rebecca, was preparing for what was to come. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. The case gained traction on social media and began to spread beyond Charleston. Atlanta newspapers, radio shows, and popular podcasts were already discussing the story of the millionaire trying to claim custody of grandchildren she never knew. And behind the spotlights, two women were preparing for a confrontation that went beyond documents. It was about memory, truth, and love. In a simple office, hastily rented by Rebecca Lynn, Danielle sat before a pile of folders. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights, but her face showed determination. Rebecca, her hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a black turtleneck, pointed to a photograph. Adrian, without a lab coat, smiling on the floor of the pediatric ward, with Jordan and Chloe sitting on his lap, and Maya making a funny face in the background. This one is strong. It doesn't just show he was involved. It shows real affection. Danielle touched the edge of the picture gently, as if handling a relic. He used to say he was never afraid with me. That with us, he was just Adrian. Rebecca watched her for a moment before saying, "Do you think Claire ever knew that version of him?" Danielle lowered her eyes. Maybe she never allowed him to show it. The evidence was gathered. Intimate photos, hospital records, archived messages, testimonials from colleagues. And, as the final piece, Adrian's original letter, the same one Claire had received weeks before, now presented in public hearing, with the signature confirmed by forensic experts. The judge authorized a DNA test, and in less than 2 weeks, the result was out. The confirmation was definitive. Jordan, Maya, and Chloe Harris were the biological children of Adrian Charles Davenport. The impact was immediate. Former allies of Claire, board members of the Institute, business leaders, socialite friends, began to distance themselves. Some cancelled events, others avoided any mention of the Davenport name. Public opinion was on Danielle's side, and any move that seemed like an attempt to buy off or erase the biological mother fueled even more outrage. Claire withdrew to the mansion. She didn't respond to journalists or issue statements, but for the first time in a long time, she began to listen. Meanwhile, in Danielle's modest home, unexpected support was growing stronger. Dr. Marcus Bell, a resident physician at the hospital, had been quietly helping behind the scenes. Tall, black, with light brown eyes and a steady voice, he always treated Danielle with respect and empathy. He had been Adrian's friend. He knew about their involvement, and even in silence, he always believed she deserved justice. He started by visiting the house to deliver medications and help with the court paperwork. Then he brought toys for the kids. Later, he stayed for dinner. Little by little, his presence became part of their routine, but he never intruded. He added, on a quiet night, while Maya and Chloe slept and Jordan was drawing on the living room rug, Marcus said goodbye at the door with a calm smile. "If you need me, just call." Danielle hesitated before responding. There was something in his gaze she was beginning to recognize, a kind of affection that asked for nothing in return. "Thank you for not treating me like a case, but like a person." He simply replied, "You are so much more than a case, Danielle. You are courage in the flesh." She smiled, shyly, and gently closed the door. For the first time in years, her heart was beating with something other than fear. And while Claire watched her reputation crumble under the weight of the truth, Danielle was finally starting to rebuild, with dignity, love, and true support. But the fight wasn't over yet. The following days were marked by silence. No statements, no open letters, no effort at public defense. Claire had disappeared. The mansion gates remained closed, the curtains always drawn. But inside, something had changed. She had read and reread every page of the case. She had seen every image submitted by Danielle. What devastated her the most wasn't the scandal, nor the headlines. It was having to face the fact that her own son had left a legacy of love, that she ignored in the name of control. Claire no longer saw herself as the victim, and for the first time, she wasn't ashamed to admit she was wrong. That Saturday morning, she chose to go alone. She took the car without calling the chauffeur, wearing a beige sweater and simple tailored pants. No makeup, her hair in a low bun. She carried nothing but a white envelope, and a regret too big to contain. The neighborhood was simple but alive. Children ran on the sidewalk, men washed cars with improvised buckets, elderly women swept the pavement as if cleaning the world. Claire parked next to a tree and slowly walked to the house she had only visited once. She stopped on the sidewalk and watched. Danielle was in the yard, sitting in a wooden chair, reading a story softly to her children. Marcus was beside her, chuckling quietly at something Jordan was saying. The scene was so peaceful, it was almost unsettling. Something Claire didn't know how to recognize, but silently envied. It was Maya who saw her first. She dropped her crayon on the ground and ran toward the gate. She wore a yellow dress, and her hair was tied in two messy braids. "You came back," she said, her eyes shining. "Do you still want to be our grandma?" Claire crouched down right there, outside the gate. Her knees touched the hot cement, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. But then, feeling her throat tighten and her eyes fill, she answered with a choked voice, "If you'll let me. Yes, I really do." Chloe approached quietly, standing beside her sister. Jordan stood a few steps back, watching with eyes too mature for his age. Danielle stood slowly, and for a second her eyes met Claire's. There was no anger, there was something much deeper, recognition, weariness, and a dignity Claire now understood. Marcus, beside Danielle, gently touched her hand. He said nothing. It was a small but firm gesture. A gesture of someone who is there and will stay. Claire opened the envelope and took out a drawing. It was of Adrian, sketched by Jordan. On the back, she had written by hand, "He lives in you, and if you'll let me, I want to get to know him through your eyes." Danielle approached with slow steps. She stopped a few feet away. Her voice was low but clear. "They have a lot of him, but they also have a lot of me. If you want to know them, you have to know all of it." Claire nodded, saying nothing. She just opened her arms. The girls ran through the gate, and Jordan, after a few seconds of silence, slowly walked up to her and held out his hand. Claire held it with both of hers, and for the first time, she smiled. Not with pride, not with power, but with humility. But there were no winners, no losers, just people who, through crooked paths, were finally finding each other. That week, the whole city was talking about Claire Davenport, but not for the reasons they used to. There was something different in her posture, in the way she walked, in how she spoke. The name still carried weight, but she no longer wore it as a shield, but as a responsibility. The first change came as a shock to the Davenport Institute board. In an extraordinary meeting, Claire announced the end of 3 long-standing partnerships with investors who refused to support grassroots causes. In their place, she revealed the creation of a new program, the Adrian Fund, dedicated exclusively to supporting single mothers, overlooked families, and childhood education in underprivileged neighborhoods. "My son believed in realities I refused to see," she said firmly. "Now, it's my duty to continue what he started, with my eyes open." The decision divided the board. Some members resigned in protest, saying Claire was handing over the family legacy. She didn't try to stop them. "A legacy that doesn't include compassion is not a legacy I want to keep." But the biggest surprise came soon after. During a community event, Claire stepped onto the makeshift wooden stage and called Danielle to the microphone. "Today, I'm proud to announce that Danielle Harris will be the new Director of Social Projects for the Institute. No one is better suited to understand, care for, and transform what we've pretended not to see for too long." Danielle, in a navy blue dress, her hair loose over her shoulders, walked up slowly, her eyes brimming. Beside the stage, the children smiled, and Jordan held a handmade sign that read, "You are our gift, Mummy." The audience gave a standing ovation. Behind the scenes of this new chapter, Marcus remained present, not as a savior, but as a partner. Over time, his relationship with Danielle turned into something light and genuine, a love built on respect, mutual support, and rebuilding. One evening, while helping Jordan with a school project, Marcus turned to Danielle and said softly, "What if we really joined forces? The clinic with the social project, the two of us." Danielle smiled, her eyes filled with tenderness. "I think we're already doing that. You just hadn't noticed yet." Meanwhile, Claire was relearning how to be a grandmother. On weekends, she took the girls to paint in the park and taught Jordan how to play chess in the garden of the old house. There were no photographers, no society columns, just laughter, crumbs on the floor, and the sound of 3 little voices calling, "Grandma." One night, seeing her grandchildren asleep after an afternoon together, Claire turned to Danielle with a tired but peaceful look. "Thank you for not giving up on them, or on me." Danielle replied gently, "I just did what any mother would do." But what you did was more than courage. It was making things right. Claire delicately held her hand. "They taught me to love, without needing to control. I needed to learn that." Time passed. The wounds healed without erasing the scars. And maybe that's what made them real. The Institute thrived with purpose, and that family, born of the unlikely, grew together. Because in the end, Claire understood what Adrian had always known. Blood may connect bodies, but respect connects souls. And sometimes, a true family is born from the courage to say no. No to silence. No to shame. No to what's easy. But yes to what transforms. And that was the story of Claire, Danielle, and the 3 little hearts that brought together 2 very different worlds. Now tell me, what did you think of this journey full of pain, difficult choices, and redemption? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 for this story in the comments. If it moved you in any way, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who also loves real and deep stories, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters. Before you go, I picked out another touching story that will move you even more. You won't want to miss it.